I support President Trump, and I believe that most of his policies on national security are right. I believe his instincts are pretty good. But what I'm telling you, whoever believes that there is any space for Vladimir Putin in the future of a stable globe better go to Ukraine. They better go to Europe. They better invest the time to understand that this man is a cancer and the greatest threat to democracy in my lifetime. So, ladies and gentlemen, when I tell you that Vladimir Putin is a liar, a murderer, and a man responsible for ordering the systematic torture, kidnapping, and rape of innocent civilians, believe me, because the evidence is mile high. If you believe that Ukraine is a country an ocean away and not relevant to our national security, think again. The world is small. The world is watching. The strength of our alliances are on the line, and the future of democracy in the world is on the line if we do anything less than defeat Vladimir Putin.
That is Republican Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina on the Senate floor yesterday, actually saying the quiet part out loud, voicing the concerns of the Senate floor, on the Senate floor, that most of his fellow Republicans are whispering in the GOP cloakroom, and what America's closest allies are voicing across Western democracies that stood by the United States of America in our fight against Nazism and Soviet communism. And also the same concerns being voiced among Donald Trump's most loyal defenders in the media. Most this morning are still asking whether Mr. Trump's cruel positioning against Ukraine is merely some misaligned, some disastrous opening bid in negotiations, or a drastic realignment of U.S. foreign policy that will be more dangerous, more immoral, and encourage more Russian invasions across Eastern and Central Europe. Just ahead, we're going to show you how Donald Trump's national security advisor is now trying to explain the president's position, which is exactly the opposite of what his has been when he was a member of Congress. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It's Friday, February 21st. With us, we have co-host of our fourth hour and contributing writer at The Atlantic, Jonathan Lemire, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist and associate editor of The Washington Post, Eugene Robinson. We have writer-at-large for The New York Times, Elizabeth Buehler, managing editor at The Bulwark, Sam Stein, and also we have the host of Way Too Early, Ali Vitale. And you know, Gene, we're going to get to Ukraine in a minute, but I just think we shouldn't let what Thom Tillis said go by without a comment off the top. What Senator Tillis said is actually publicly is what almost every Republican senator is saying privately. What almost every Republican House member is saying privately that's on the Armed Services Committee or the Foreign Affairs Committee. They are horrified by what they're hearing. And now we're going to be reporting that the G7 has scrubbed their official communique to take out Russia as the aggressor in a war that Vladimir Putin clearly started.
Yeah, absolutely. So the G7 cannot publish a joint statement with the phrase Russian aggression in it. Look, this is insane, but you talk about it as, well, maybe it's an opening bid. People are saying this is Trump being Trump or whatever. I don't see why anyone should not believe him. He likes Vladimir Putin. He can't stand Vladimir Zelensky. We know that. You know how much of foreign policy, domestic policy, how much of life is just personal to Donald Trump. His own grievances, his own petty slights that he believes that he experienced. And I think he fully intends to follow through with this new completely un-American, disastrous foreign policy that he has outlined in the last few days.
Yeah, and he's made it deeply personal, calling Zelensky a modestly successful comedian, calling for new elections in Ukraine, demanding half of their minerals with their deal. We did hear Secretary of State Rubio behind closed doors try to reassure Europeans that maybe U.S. policy not changing as much as they're positioning publicly, but that's basically, Joe, that has left, allies and adversaries alike sort of bewildered. But at the end of the day, this is Donald Trump's decision. And let's remember, it's very reminiscent of the first term, where Trump publicly very friendly towards Putin, but the administration and the Congress at times took steps to punish Russia. We'll have to see if that happens around this time, too. Certainly, Senator Tillis breaking with the White House yesterday, saying publicly what so many of his colleagues are saying privately. Others have been very much more modest in their criticism, saying they disagree with the idea that Putin is a good guy, but not willing to actually criticize Trump for what he's saying. We're going to have to see this time, though, if the guardrails hold, where this time Trump pushes through and says, look, this is our new approach to Moscow and Europe.
And again, we really had a tale of two administrations in the first term. It's so important for people to remember that in the first administration, you have Donald Trump saying things like he said at the Helsinki press conference in 2018 in response to your question that he trusted Vladimir Putin more than his own people that he put in to run the intel community. At the same time, his vice president was going to Western Europe delivering speeches that were Reagan-esque, anti-Soviet, anti-Russian aggression. You, of course, also had Republicans in the Senate at the same time when Donald Trump was saying things that caused grave concerns among many Republicans. They were passing the toughest sanctions that had ever been passed on Russia. So we'll see if this is an opening bid. We'll see if you, in fact, have Russians having to actually step up and make sacrifices at the negotiating table if they want it to end, or whether this is, again, a radical new step, a radical new direction for the United States foreign policy. Regardless, the cost, the impact of that on our foreign policy, even if it's reeled back in the next week, and there's no reason to believe it would be, is incalculable, and will once again have our allies, our closest allies, our most important allies, asking the question, can we trust the United States of America? Elizabeth, one other thing, too, that I don't think people are underlining enough. I know we've talked about it a little bit on this show, but all things are personal with Donald Trump. Foreign policy is personal with Donald Trump. If he decides that he likes the most bloodthirsty dictator on earth in North Korea, and they write love letters. He calls them love letters. Everything is personal, and it's so important to remember how Donald Trump's relationship with Zelensky began. It began in July of 2019 when he made the, quote, perfect phone call, as he said, where, he was trying to shake down Zelensky. To dig up dirt on his political rival, Joe Biden, and his family while he was in the middle of a presidential campaign, and basically saying you can get your $400 million that Congress has already appropriated, but before you do, I need you to dig up dirt on Joe Biden. Zelensky refused to do that, and if people want to understand why he loathes Zelensky so much, that's a good place to start.
Yes, and then, of course, Zelensky made the great mistake of actually saying the truth, which is that Donald Trump was in a web of disinformation. I'm sure Trump just was shocked that Zelensky it was the most critical thing that Zelensky's ever said of Trump in public. And so then you got the backlash from Trump saying that Zelensky basically started the war. I think it's interesting, especially Marco Rubio's role here, though, that he is what he was saying to the Europeans in a call after Trump sidled up to Putin was that keep calm. This is not a major change in the administration's policy. Of course it is, and of course it is against what Rubio himself. He's he's a big Russia hawk. So it's if you're a European and you're seeing this, you hear on one hand from the commander-in-chief that we're going to be closer to Russia. On the other hand, you hear from the Secretary of State, pay no attention. You're in a state of confusion, and I can tell you, most Europeans are going to pay attention to what the president is saying and not what the Secretary of State is saying.
Yeah, one diplomat from Europe telling me already damage already been done in terms of relations, and certainly all signs suggest this will be a new policy from the United States. Much more on